By the time of his death in 1928, Arthur Stilwell had amassed a fortune, founded 40 towns, and built miles upon miles of railroads. While he's often forgotten among the many notable figures of the Gilded Age, there's something unique about Stilwell. He heard voices. It was by no means unusual for Arthur. In fact, he had begun hearing these little voices since he was 15. They would come to him at all times of the day, from when he was trying to sleep to when he was reading. They frightened him at first, but after a while, he got used to their consistent presence. In his diary, he wrote that the voices told him he would meet and marry a girl named Genevieve Wood. Within 4 years of this diary entry, while working as a traveling insurance salesman, Arthur indeed met and married Genevieve, who he affectionately referred to as Jenny. Like most young couples, they were broke, having little except each other. Arthur first found work driving a freight wagon, where he eventually was promoted to clerk. And as a clerk, it seemed he would be stuck, with no higher education, no money, and no prospects. But he had the voices, and the voices were always there, whispering in his ear, urging him to abandon his job and go out west to helm the creation of a vast network of railroads, spreading their steely appendages across the still young America. Arthur ignored them for as long as he could, but curiosity eventually got the better of him. He quit his job, and he and Jenny packed what little they had into a borrowed wagon and moved to Kansas City in the 1880s. Arthur was still unable to begin the project the voices urged him to undertake. How could he possibly build a railroad with no money? He took up a job at a bond house and brokerage firm selling insurance, and it was from here that he took his first real steps towards greatness. Arthur developed a type of industrial insurance that proved to be wildly successful. The policy was designed to offer protection to employees for any injury, illness, or death that occurred on the worksite. At a time when industrial labor was extremely dangerous, this policy was seen as progressive, and it set a precedent that other companies would eventually follow. And with that, it was almost unbelievable, but it was happening. This nobody clerk making $40 a week was now building a railroad. Local bankers knew and trusted him, and he never had any issues securing funds for his project. Bit by bit, Stilwell quietly bought land, got his funds in order. Before New York financiers knew what was happening, he had the Kansas City Beltline Railroad in full operation. And from that success, others came just as easily. Stillwell's vision included an ambitious project that other railroad magnates had somehow overlooked: a railroad connecting the Gulf of Mexico to the heartland of America. Construction began on the Kansas City South Railroad immediately. Whenever Arthur faced setbacks, tough decisions, or any sort of problems, he would always consult the voices. He affectionately referred to them as brownies, a type of fae folk. He would become more open about the voices later in his life, much to the surprise of his peers, but no one could call him crazy, as whatever he did seemed to be guided by an invisible hand. The Kansas City Southern Railroad was destined to connect the Gulf of Mexico into the port town of Galveston, Texas. All was going smoothly until the railroad was just 50 miles outside of Galveston. Stilwell had retired to his office, drawn the blinds closed, and consulted with the voices. What they told him was alarming, to say the least. The voices warned he should not continue to the decided destination of Galveston, as the town was fated for destruction. If he continued, his career would face a similar fate. Stillwell was in a pinch. His business partners couldn't be expected to believe him, not with such an unconventional means of guidance. He would face massive backlash from the waiting population of Galveston and his investors. Still, the voices had never steered him wrong. Stillwell squared his jaw, prepared to face the backlash, and ordered a sudden change in construction plans. His investors and partners were bewildered, demanding an explanation for the sudden change in destination. The citizens of Galveston were even more outraged. Arthur stuck with his decision, rerouting the railway to a desolate location along the Gulf of Mexico that would later become Port Arthur, named in his honor. Not long after, the doom the voices prophesied came to pass. A massive hurricane rolled in from the Gulf of Mexico, absolutely obliterating Galveston. Yet, Port Arthur's infrastructure and docks remained totally unharmed. In fact, they were instrumental to the emergency relief of the shattered Galveston. His business partners, who just moments ago were ready to call for his head, commended him on his choice and his good luck. Arthur, now known as Lucky Stilwell, just smiled and said nothing. Arthur remained private about his experiences with the voices, keeping it only between him and his wife. They both decided that, for now, it was best to continue to do so. It was just simply too strange to be believed. How could he explain that he knew his wife's name 4 years before they met? How the advice of the voices turned him from a penniless nobody into a millionaire railroad magnate in just 7 years? Or how he could have possibly known about the coming destruction of Galveston? Throughout his long life, Stilwell built 7 railroads stretching over 2,300 miles and the Port Arthur Ship Canal. He founded 40 cities and towns along his railroads, 2 of which bear his name, Port Arthur, Texas, and Stillwell, Oklahoma. In 1912, Stillwell retired, moving with his wife to New York. There, they spent a peaceful retirement with Arthur writing plays, books, and poetry. Some of these books seemed oddly predictive of the coming turmoil of the 20th century. In 1910, he wrote a novel called Universal Peace, War is Mesmerism. Besides expanding on his beliefs in war and peace, it predicted in eerie detail the coming of the First World War. Later, in 1914, he published another book, this one titled To All the World Except Germany. In this prophetic book, he predicted the defeat of Germany and the Axis powers, the collapse of the Russian monarchy, the independence of Poland and Finland, and then the settling of the Jews in Palestine. Arthur passed away in 1928 of apoplexy. Not 2 weeks later, his beloved Jenny stepped out of a skyscraper window to join him, forever taking the secrets of the voices with them. This leaves the rest of us to try and make sense of it all. Why him? What were the voices, and what can we make of it? Sometimes, the questions are far more interesting than any answer. Thank you for watching.